Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. A quick introduction. My name is Hassan. I'm the applications manager in Zontal Group in the Nordics. And I have my guest today with me, Pernille. She's a lighting designer in SLA. And she's going to walk us through a very interesting, I would say, presentation about darkness.
Thank you.
And enhancing the darkness in our atmosphere.
Yeah. So hi, as Hassan said, my name is Pernille. I work at the SLA in Copenhagen, and I am going to talk to you today about working with the nature-based lighting and enhancing the natural rhythms of light and darkness. In today's talk, we will talk a bit about how to embrace the natural darkness and experience experience the night. We will talk a bit about how to work with an interdisciplinary approach and how to work in different cultures and contexts. And also we will end with a small topic of pushing for sustainable options in the lighting industry. So for those of you who doesn't know, SLA is a nature-based design studio. We are placed in Copenhagen, Oslo, and Aarhus. And we design places for life, all life. So we usually say that we design urban spaces where we have to coexist with nature. So it should both be a good habitat for humans, but also for the biodiversity and for the plants. And that also means that we always start our projects with asking, what would nature do in this situation? And we even do that when we design new roundabouts. In the photo here, you see a roundabout in Copenhagen, in Østerbro, where we have been working with the aesthetic feeling of being in nature, even though you are very close to the road. And we try to create some recreational urban space where we could really enhance biodiversity. At the same time, it is also making this area resilient to future cloudbursts. And on top of that, the nature is helping with reducing traffic noise, air pollution, and the urban heat island effect in this area. Then we could ask, so what about natural darkness? If we look at this famous photo, it's called Earthrise, and it's from the Apollo 8. It shows very clearly that on planet Earth, we have a natural rhythm of being in light and darkness, depending on the time of day and our place on the globe. And this is something that humans have tried to improve, you could say, because we would really much like to extend our lives into the night. So we started with bonfires, then it became more like fire-based solutions. And then in 1878, the natural rhythm of light and darkness started to change because of the invention of the incandescent lamp. If we look at this light pollution map of Europe, we can see very clearly in which cities and areas in Europe we have a high activity during the dark hours, or at least where we have tried to extend the daytime into the night. But it is not only showing in which areas we have big cities, it's also showing which countries can afford to spend a lot of extra energy without any use, because this is actually light pollution. And this also means that in those areas, there is a loss of night. This is a map that everyone can access from NASA, so you can go and check your area. And then we can ask, what are the consequences of losing the night? I think that it's very important to look at maybe the aesthetic consequences, but also the understanding of how small we are in the universe. So research from 2016 states that 60 to 80% of people on Earth has never seen the Milky Way. And current Danish research states that 41% of children between 2 and 15 have never seen a starry sky. And if we look at the two photos here on the right, we can see that this is taken during a blackout in Ontario from 2003. And it just shows very clearly how we would usually see the night sky when we live in urban developments and what is hiding behind all of our light pollution. And it just looks magnificent, I would say. If we look at light pollution, it is usually said that it is consisting of 3 different parts. It can be sky glow. Usually if you see a big city from afar, you can sometimes see this globe of light escaping the city. We also have more locally light trespass. Maybe you live in a house or an apartment that is close to a street lamp that is not shielded properly, and you get a lot of spill light into your bedroom that can have an effect on your sleep. But also we have glare that can ultimately be a safety issue. I will show you why in the next slide. If you look at the photo on the right, then we see here that maybe you can just see that there is a small contour now that you know behind the door, but actually glare can be one of the big issues with the perceived safety at night, because our visual system is trying to correct for the brightest source of light in the space, and then it becomes hard to see what hides in the dark. But it also has some other consequences, because as humans, we have a 24-hour cycle of light and dark, and actually the timing of light is quite important. If we look at this figure on the right, it is probably known to all of us that light is controlling our sleep and wake cycle, as we also see in the sketch of the melatonin and cortisol levels. This is something that can be pushed very well with light. We use it in therapy, for example, with winter depression, but it is also controlling a lot of other factors in our body than this. It controls your body temperature. It is about when you have your best digestion. It is determining when during the day you have your best cardio, and so on. So there are many things inside our body that is actually affected when we get light at the wrong time of day, not just our sleep. It also has a big effect on animals. Probably a lot of you know that it is attracting insects, and that we have a lot of issues with lights with an open surface that attract so many insects that they cannot escape this globe. And there was some very interesting research that came out earlier this year about why. Then we also have migrating birds. That is a big topic also in light pollution. In the photo you see the World Trade Center memorial, and these laser beams are attracting every year around 20,000 birds, and ultimately they get stuck, like you know the rabbit in the headlight of the car, and they cannot escape again, and this makes them very tired and disoriented, and that can mean that they will die when they fly overseas, or they come out of these beams and they crash into a high-rise, etc. So it's very important also, especially during migrating season for birds. And then on the right, we have the bats. Maybe it's not something we think about too much, but for bats, it is actually a very big influence on their hunting and their nocturnal sort of hunting scheme, you could say. Some bats follow the light to hunt in corridors, and others sees it like as a very big break, like a wall, basically. And we have many endangered species within bats, so we're also trying to look into that. And then, as if it wasn't enough with humans and animals, it also has an impact on trees. So every time we light up a tree, we usually say that we could potentially destroy a habitat, so that's why we try to avoid it. But also it has a negative impact on the tree, because urban trees that are placed very close to a strong light source, they have a harder time letting go of their leaves in the winter. And this could harm the tree during the winter because we have more storms, etc. So it's a big thing to also consider. And current research is also showing that leaves on trees close to streetlight has a very much harder leaf that makes it hard for insects and birds to feed on plants. Yeah. So how do we, in this regard, ask what would nature do? Basically, nature would work with the cycle of the moonlight, which has like a monthly circle of around 28 days, right? And in some phases, the moon will be gone and it will be almost 0.0001 lux. But at a full moon, it can be up to 0.3 lux. And with our human eye, we can actually adapt very well and we can see quite a lot. In this photo, it's from Møns Klint. And you can also see how the different materials react quite differently in the dark, but I would say that even in this photo, we can see quite a lot. And if you are there with just your eyes, it is actually quite impressive. So could we work with moonlight? I went to the Enlighten Europe conference in London earlier this year, and researcher Paulina Villalobos, she asked the question, what if nighttime lighting was communicated in moons? Could we actually talk to clients and talk to them about one full moon? Then you sort of have an idea about how much is that, how much light is that, and then say 3 lux is actually already 10 full moons. So if you are asking for 30 lux in this outdoor area, then it would be 100 full moons, and that seems a bit excessive maybe. And we could also maybe start by making a light pollution baseline so that we know the area that we work on, if it has like already bad light pollution conditions, or if it is actually a place where you would be able to see the stars. If you look on the map on the left, this is Denmark, and on a scale from blue to red, the red has the most light. And if you go on the map and you press anywhere, you get a small like sky brightness information. And in that you can find the Bortle scale. So if you go in the image above, you can see that the Bortle scale is like for astronomers or the people that like to look with at the stars at night. And in a place like our backyard in an urban sky, you can see one of the astronomers that has taken a photo from his backyard with the Bortle class 8 sky, and then a photo of the Milky Way from a national park with Bortle class 2. So there is quite a big difference in this, almost like what we saw in the light pollution photo earlier. And maybe this is also interesting to look at when we design lights, because maybe we design in a new area and we could actually do something. And then at SLA, we also try to ask, can we work with this feeling of natural darkness? We don't want it to be unsafe, but we also want to give people the opportunity to experience what happens in nature at night. And we are trying to really work with this harmony between light and natural darkness. And we do that by trying to balance. For example, we also design very different if we are in an urban space in a city center or if we are in a more rural area. But we try to enhance this human experience of the night, and we work with, as you see in the photos, chalk, for example, or lime scale, is that what it's called in English? Where you can also make some pathfinder or markers during the path, so that maybe we have light in some areas and others are kept dark, and then you, if you want to explore, you can walk there and your eyes get used to the darkness, and then you can actually experience how the animals, you can hear better, you have other senses that become awakened at night. We also try to work very much with an interdisciplinary design approach. So that's in our office, we have, of course, urban designers and landscape architects, but then if we include lighting designers in the mix with the biologists and the plant specialists and the anthropologists, then we can actually understand the site much better, both from a cultural, social, and environmental context, and make something tailored. In the photos here, we have the Tomsgårdsvej. It's in Copenhagen Northwest. It is not an area that is perceived to be the safest, and therefore the people that lived there thought that they needed to have a very high light level in their courtyard. But from working with them and sort of showing them what could be done, we actually ended up creating a courtyard that has like a very low uniformity. We have more like effect lighting in the area. We also took all the lights that were placed above the doors and placed it further down next to the door to avoid glare, and just sort of kept all the lights very warm. And we used a lot of vertical surfaces, and the feedback from the people living there has been very, very good, even though it could be perceived as unsafe from some people. I will go through a few case studies now from projects from around the world. So, how do you experience the night across cultures? That's a question that I'm very sort of, how do you say, optaget. I'm very focused on this because I think it's interesting. We work in many different countries, and we cannot always just come with our Scandinavian lighting approach. For example, here we see on the left David Crombie Park in Toronto. It's a city park, and the first proposal we made for them, they were like, this is like way too little light, and are you crazy? You cannot see anything. But then we worked with the client to come up with a compromise, and then we also made a dimming strategy so that it is possible, for example, that sports courts are not lit all night, and you can maybe try to also create some experiences. In the second is Malmö, which is in Sweden, where it's possible to have much lower light levels in public spaces. Then we have Ranim Garden, which is a park from Abu Dhabi, where they generally have very high requirements for light levels and uniformity, and are also a country where they use the parks very late at night, both for socializing, for sports, and for kids to play. And then on the right, we have this Meanwhile installation in Aarhus, where we worked with colored light and smoke to create this experience within the park. So the first case study is Sund Naturpark. It's an urban project here in Copenhagen, quite central. It is a school for medical students, and it has public access on the right. You can see this sort of public bike path and walking path that is a very used connection. If we look at this project, we can say that we had a very clear lighting hierarchy, and we tried to discuss a lot the different lighting classes that we had to use. And also we tried to push for some dark zones for biodiversity, but also for the neighbors. And if you see in this photo, it's actually very interesting to see how those very light materials we have used in our path is making the light seem so bright compared to the surrounding asphalt and also the bridge. After these photos were taken, we had a small research project where we tried to dim down the lights. It was dimmed down with 85% from this photo to 15%. And there has never been any complaint, and it has never been turned up again. So it's just to say that sometimes it's maybe interesting when you have these smart solutions where you can actually control it, that you can save quite a lot of energy, and also you can create some nice evening environments. We also have the case study that I already talked about. This is the Tomsgårdsvej. And some of the tools we used there were user involvement, a high focus on what is perceived safety for the people that live here. We really tried to work with reducing the light pollution, also for the people living in the apartments. And then we really wanted to create some nice habitats for biodiversity. It required, of course, a lot of desktop research, site visits, and also to just create small interviews with people in the streets, the anthropological. And then we have our El Fay Park in Abu Dhabi. This is from 2019, and it is also just to say that actually we have done some parks in the past that we would probably work a bit different on today. If you see these parks, then our approach at that time was to give the client what they want in the sports areas. It's a sports park, so all the central areas, they have the cooler lights that they ask for and the high uniformity and the uplights and everything. And then as soon as we go into nature, we change for a much warmer lighting temperature, and then we still create some dark areas in between. But to be honest, if this was a park we would have to design today, we would push more. And I also feel that we still work in UAE, and we have clients in Abu Dhabi that are also more receptive to the way we design in Scandinavia now, also because they have seen some more SLA projects. So now we would not install uplights, and we would not install 4000 Kelvin. And we would probably also discuss dim to warm and installing sensors and having lighting curfews. I think it is also a big thing in these countries to try to reduce the quantities of luminaires and then ask for better quality, simply because then you can maybe save some money, and the client will also respond very well to that. But then we can get better quality lights that can still fulfill the requirements. And also, like, yeah, glare reduction is a big thing. And then I will end with a few slides on sustainability. Maybe the sustainable development goals are a bit old by now, but I think it's important to remember that when we work with lighting, we have a big responsibility, because we can actually fit in on many of these goals, and we still have the opportunity to create the future nature areas and urban spaces. So how can we help with specifying the sustainable lighting solutions? I think it's good to be an advocate for high quality products, especially because it will have a longer lifespan. And within this, I would also always ask for products that has spare parts. It is reducing the waste, and it is also a matter of trying to promote circularity, as you see on the image here from the TM66. I think it could be super if we could have available disassembly information also for products. And for the future, I would like to also work with the EPDs for all the lighting fixtures, including the transportation, so we can figure out our carbon footprint. I think it would be nice to have very good retrofitting options at attractive price ranges, because nowadays it can sometimes be a bigger, how do you say, benefit for the client to buy new instead of retrofitting. But also it's nice to work with products that is designed with a full life cycle in mind. And if you are working with sustainable certifications, there are options to get credits for lighting in both BREEAM, LEED, WELL, and DGNB, and also to reduce light pollution, etc. So it's also a good selling point. If we look at some tools to understand the environmental impact of lighting, then the CIPSE has this TM66 that you can read about how to create a circular economy in the lighting industry. There is a TM65.2, which is about embodied carbon in building services, and this one is for lighting. And if we look at that topic about the embodied carbon, you can also look at this Danish material pyramid. It is the one you see down here. It does not have lighting included, but you can still see the materials that is used for different products. And then we come to life cycle assessment. That can also be done with luminaires. EPDs, as I also mentioned before, environmental product declaration, where we can see the carbon footprint or global warming potential of the different fixtures. And to make this a bit more concrete, I found a research project where you can find it yourself. It is the paper is called LCA of LED luminaire and impact on lighting installation, a case study from education groups. So in this project, a group of researchers looked into one specific luminaire where they had the EPD. And from that, we could see that the biggest impact came from the raw materials. In that case, it was alu and the LED itself. It was the operational energy use and the manufacturing process. Actually, it showed in this is only for one product, so we have to look this. That's why it's important to have different EPDs to look at. But the operational energy use in this case was 96% of the total global warming potential, which is a lot. And in the project, they tried different variations, and they found out that even just implementing a daylight control in the classrooms, it would reduce the global warming potential with up to 10%. So that is just showing why it is so important to turn off the light when we don't need it. On average, I have a fact here, we spend 0.5 kilo CO2 for each kilowatt hour used in Denmark. So that's why I think it is very important that we also push for smart solutions for our cities. You can see with the crisis, the energy crisis, it would have been nice if all the street lighting had been DALI, so you could have just dimmed it down. But maybe we can make special control strategies and dimming options for our projects, use fewer lamps with better light distribution, and also to use clean energy for when we manufacture or when we produce, because that also has an impact. So how do we do responsible lighting for projects at night? And here are the Roland manifesto, as many of you might know. So it's important that all our lights have a clear purpose. It's important that they are targeted, so they are only directed where we need it, which is for once not up into the air. We can try to work with low light levels. It's not that it has to be dark everywhere, but maybe it doesn't have to be brighter than necessary. And then control strategies. All lighting should be dimmable so that it can be turned off when not required. And also we can use warmer color temperatures where it's possible. We have made this graphic from SLA where you can see how this Roland principles is affecting both the attraction of insects and birds and bats, and also has an effect on the stars. So if we have this first not shielded light, you can see that it is attracting a lot of insects and it is creating a lot of spill light. So we would say shield the light, aim it where it's needed, use warmer light if you can. If not, maybe it can be dim to warm, or there can be other options. At least we can always maybe dim it down at night. And then last but not least, maybe we can at least add a timer or a sensor or something. Yeah. So this is my last slide. And I just want to say that in SLA, we try with working with the aesthetic feeling of nature during the day. And I think that for all of our projects, we should try to reduce also the light pollution and include the night and the starry sky in our projects. So yeah, thank you so much. And
thank you very much, Pernille. This is really interesting. I have a few questions in my mobile. You mentioned a couple of times perceived safety. It's an interesting term.
yes.
Can you maybe elaborate a little bit?
Yes, I will try. In a lot of projects, where we propose our lighting design, the first question from the client will be, is it safe? And I cannot sit in front of you, for example, and say it will be safe for you to walk here, because I cannot guarantee that. But I can say that that we are working with, how to say, your perception of safety. So because there are many factors of how to make an area safe. And I think that at least by sort of reducing the glare and trying to work with this like balanced night, it can make the perceived safety better, because it will make sure that you can better see what is going on around you. I think that it is very different if you are a man or a woman walking around at night. I think it can also have a big impact to say which city you live in. For example, we live in Copenhagen, which is a super safe city. And still, maybe I would not choose to walk through a dark park at night. But then my question is, do I have to walk through that park at night? Like, do we need to have lights in the park so I can walk through it at night? Or is it actually nature, and should it behave on the terms of nature? Because I can always bike around it.
Yeah. Interesting. Another point is the understanding of cultural, social, and environmental context when you're designing. I find this really interesting. How do you tackle that when you are approaching a project?
I think that the first thing is to be aware that if we have a project that is in a different country, they will not just automatically think that it's awesome that we are designing with light and darkness. Maybe they think it is a very strange approach. We also have some of the projects where they also really want us to use colored light, for example, that we also try to avoid. So I think that what is important is to ask the people on the project that maybe know the site and the context better, to ask the right questions. And I try to also do some desktop research. If we have a new area, I try to investigate, do we have any access to nighttime photos? Can I see what is going on at night in this city? If I know anyone that grew up in that city, I will maybe go and ask. It could be a colleague, or it could be someone from the group, to ask, how do people actually use this area?
Okay.
Yeah, so we try to sort of make sure that we know how the area is used, what kind of people are there, and yeah, how should we design before we start? Because then it's easier also to have a conversation about it. Because yeah, usually we sit remote, and then we have many like online meetings, right? So it's just important to do your base work. And also, I'm quite lucky that I have colleagues that work with the anthropological method and some biologists, and we always have a baseline of what is happening in this area before we start. So I know what kind of animals we are trying to attract, and how the streets are used, and how are all these like the wayfinding before and after. So
interesting. Last question. Something that stood out in your presentation was that you start your lighting design with darkness.
Yes.
Some sort of a paradox there.
Yeah, you could say.
How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I think that it's very interesting to start with a clean slate, right? So we try to look at this at our site, you can say, and then we say again, what would nature do? So it starts with the moon, right? So back in the days, people would design moon gardens. Now I go a bit off topic, but I find this very interesting, and that is also a small like research thing I have going on to investigate these like old gardens where people would use plants that have sort of white foliage, so you can experience in moonlight. You have some plants that have like a nice smell only at nighttime. and you go out there and all your senses are awakened. You can hear better, you smell better, you can see all these new ways to experience the nature. And I think that is nice to start with. So we see, okay, what would we be able to see here if we didn't add any light? And from that, we can start to talk to our colleagues about, what are the materials you have used for this path? How is this path in hierarchy, like compared with this? And what do we want the people to experience here at night? And then we start to build so that we say, okay, the designers have thought this is the main path, but maybe they have a small secret pocket in this garden, like, or it's usually maybe big parks, right? And then we just try to say, okay, main path that has like the full light and it follows maybe a light hierarchy, but then in the other areas we can try to work with like much lower levels and contrast to give it a bit more of an effect. And then so we just start with figuring out what's already there and then what do we need to add. And also we try to incorporate surrounding light sources, if you can say that, because maybe we are in an urban center and there is already a lot of spill light from advertisement or street lights, and maybe we can reduce the light in some areas. And then as part of this process, we also talk to our biologists and plant designers, and we try to create some more dense nature areas where we know it will be dark enough for animals to hide at night, and then we place maybe the light in different zones so that we sort of try to work strategically with sort of building these layers of light.
Interesting.
Does it make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. To the second part of the presentation, which is a little bit less magical, but I think equally important.
Exactly.
It's the practical side of it. Pernille, in her presentation, mentioned pushing sustainability, and she set a really challenging criteria. She mentioned the quality of the products should be high. She wanted to know about spare parts, disassembly information, EPDs, including transportation, retrofitting options that are economically logical, let's say, and that products that are designed in full life in mind. And I'm going to try to touch on all these, some of these points when I present my solution here. Circularity and moving from line to circle seems to be like a punchline these days. Everyone is talking about it. It's not an easy topic, easier said than done. There are many factors and variants that we need to tackle and approach, which leaves maybe several gray areas that we need to maneuver and navigate. But nevertheless, Zoptel Group has always had this focus, and we have taken some actual steps in that direction. And I'm going to try to touch on that in this short presentation. Probably we have had a lot of discussions about HID lamp source and conventional lamp source. We still have a huge quantity in the building environment. We still have a lot of work to do, and probably we need to do that very quickly because we need to improve our built environment and be more sustainable for the futures, for the future generations. I mean, in general, we wanted to start in Zoptel Group and Thorn specifically from our own backyard. We looked at the product families that we have supplied massively, especially maybe in the Nordics. I mean, Victor and Victoria are products that we delivered hundreds, around 100,000 piece only in the Nordics region. And we wanted to give them a new life. For those who know, of you who don't know what they look like, these are Victor and Victoria shapes with different installations and different methods of mounting. These products are famous in the Nordics. They have been involved in really iconic projects like here in Sweden and Norway. And the idea is that we need to give them a new spirit, a new life, and try to enforce the circularity of design and longer life. What we did we try to find solutions that, for instance, we make it easy for installation. We're using existing mechanisms in the body. We designed a heatsink that will provide longer lifetime. We used our existing technology in lamp source, but also optics to get the best out of it. We used, of course, controls so that we can get a really smart solution out of the existing fixture with using DALI 4. Just what you mentioned. Surprise, surprise. And the main idea is that we're going to upgrade the HID versions of the product, but also the first generation LED, because there has been a massive improvement in efficacy in this area. So, starting from the top, the operation should start by taking out the old technology and fitting in the new technology. The whole operation should take anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes as an average. So ease of installation is also something that we considered, because time is money. Now, why should we do refurbishment? I think the question should be, why shouldn't we do refurbishment? Because mostly the huge saving in consumption, the ownership, of course, the CO2 emission reduction, and of course, the payback in less than 5 years are all success, if we want to go in that route. And I think this is the future. And we see in the market, not only in the Nordics, but all in all, lots of owners and municipalities are coming to us saying we want to go in that route because of the obvious listed here benefits. So I think in general, if we go through the list that Pernille mentioned, we ticked a few, I would say, but that's not the only thing. We try to take our retrofit solutions past our own products, and we developed global retrofit kits that is IP rated, that can be used across manufacturers, so that we can provide an extended lifetime to an existing product that doesn't have to be Thorn based. And I think if we consider the IP rating, the existing optic solution with the latest LED chip, and the connectivity offer that we have, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you, Pernille, again, for your time. Appreciate it, and have a lovely evening.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.